Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. It's Friday, January 15th, and this is Michael Bracy welcoming you to another edition of Music Policy Forum Live, our weekly conversation program, where we talk about a host of issues related to music and public policy and activism and the changing nature of our music ecosystems and everything else under the sun. We are thrilled, as always, that you are with us today. We know you have a lot of things competing for your time and attention, and we're always, again, very humbled and appreciative that you want to spend some of your Friday afternoons with us. Super excited about today's program. We're going to be talking about, again, music and community and the shifting nature of how the industry has changed over time, and a little bit of politics and a little bit about the future. It's really going to be a fantastic conversation. Before we get into our guests, as always, some updates and a little bit of news, and then just sort of settling in on where we are and what we've been living through and what's ahead. So again, when we were with you last Friday, it had been 2 days after the insurrection on Capitol Hill. Today, it's 2 days after the second impeachment of Donald Trump. The inauguration will be happening on the next Wednesday, right? So we're going to go from insurrection to impeachment to inauguration every Wednesday for the first 3 weeks of the year for our program. A lot of things happening. The Save Our Stages Act, of course, for most of you who have been following this closely, now is called the Shuttered Venues Operator Grants, is the vehicle that the Small Business Administration is using to distribute the $15 billion. I can't get used to that. SOS just is so easy to say, but Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, so SVOG. So yesterday, I don't know that this is true. I was told 20,000 people signed up to be part of a Small Business Administration webinar where they were going to give some updates and information about their process and next steps. The webinar was 13 minutes long, I think 16 slides, 13 minutes, which means you could actually leave our program today, watch the webinar a couple times, and come back and rejoin us for our second guest. So if you want to go see what the SBA had to say, Alex, our producer, has put the link to the archive in the chat. I think the main takeaway again is they really didn't have any information that was different than what people had already had known and thought about, and so there's a little bit of frustration just in terms of an anticipation and hope that we would have had more details and more to go off of from yesterday's presentation. But the staff at the SBA, we all know, has a Herculean task. That's not said well. Has a huge task ahead of them. They are working extremely hard to try to get the grant notices together and get the process in place. So we give them all of our support and empathize with just the scale of what they're having to execute over the next couple of months. They did indicate that they are consolidating questions that are coming in through a sort of an email portal, and will be publishing kind of an FAQ type update. So I know organizations like NEVA are working very hard to try to get that stuff together, get the questions together so we can kind of get clarity on some of the gray area questions. Next week in our program, we're really excited that we're actually going to be featuring another organization that is sort of deeply involved in the implementation of this program, the National Independent Talent Organization, which represents talent agencies and bookers. And so Tom Chauncey and others are going to be joining us next week to talk about their perspective on how this program is rolling out and what this means from their side of the house. So we're excited again to keep bringing as much information and resources as we can, because clearly with an unprecedented program of this scale, we all have to do the best we can do to share resources, information, and try to make sure this program is a success. Last thing, I'll flag, or two more things I'll flag quickly in terms of, kind of the mechanics of where we are. Again, the inauguration takes place on Thursday. The Georgia Senate races are going to be certified on the 22nd, meaning that the Democrats will formally take control of the Senate. President-elect Biden last night came forward with his version of the next stimulus package, which is about $1.9 trillion they're attempting to put forward. Again, very uncertain times in terms of whether or not the package that he's looking to move will have political support to get through as is, or if they're going to have to do some compromising to kind of shape something different. Of great importance to people involved in this program. They're looking at roughly about $350 billion in state and local aid, which will provide incredibly important resources for publicly owned venues and public-private partnerships, and some of the sort of staff and other needs that we see in the kind of non-commercial or public side of the music economy. So again, a lot of optimism that they're going to move that package, not a lot of clarity in terms of the exact timing and the exact scale of what's going to be in there, but the president-elect is moving. Similar and kind of an interesting article in the Times this week, a bunch of interesting articles in the Times this week, but Governor Cuomo in New York came forward with a kind of an art and culture recovery plan that doesn't feel like it has a ton of details behind it at this point, but is sort of a call to arms for the New York art and culture community to, really be moving as quickly as possible and really thinking about getting resources out to the community and really thinking about what is it going to take to get entertainment and culture back up on its feet in New York State. So again, we anticipate more states are going to be doing these type of things. This, of course, dovetails very closely with our Reopen Every Venue Safely initiative. And again, we welcome and look forward to more and more state officials, mayors, others, really looking to play offense, not just around recovery, because again, the $15 billion in Save Our Stages, it's helping make up some losses, and it's important money, it's critical money, and it's a lot there, but we need to be looking forward as well. So lots going on. As always, we welcome your feedback, your questions, your comments, concerns, kindly worded constructive feedback at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. If you have topic ideas or for future programs, things like that, please feel free to reach out. And with that, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome to Music Policy Forum Live, Bertis Downs. Bertis, how are you doing? Are you still with us? Did we lose Bertis Downs? There he is.
Hello. It's my first Zoom. I've never done one of these. So.
Well, you're looking great. Good to see you.
Glad to see you.
Where are you? Are you at home?
I'm in Athens. I'm at my office in
Georgia.
Yep.
Nice. Yep. I like that. Wearing your Sunday red for Tiger. That's good. We appreciate that.
Yeah. I guess I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, we're in red. I haven't worn much red lately, but that's what I put on this morning.
Well, we got it. And Dog Dad. I like that. So we're so thrilled you're with us, Bertis. And for those of you who have not had a chance to work with Bertis or meet Bertis or hear Bertis at our conferences or events, why don't you mind, if that can put you on the spot, just do a little nickel sort of background on some of your history in the music community. And I also want to tie it into the work that you've been really passionate about in the education sector for the last couple of years as well. Do you mind doing a quick intro?
No, that's fine. I'll introduce myself. I've lived in Athens since I came here to go to law school 43 years ago now, 1978. I'd gone to college in North Carolina. I'd grown up all over. I was a missionary kid as a kid, and I went to college and then eventually found my way to law school at Georgia. Started helping out these guys who were starting a band called R.E.M. Right around the time I became a lawyer and a teacher. And 40 years later, I'm still helping them out, even though they broke up 10 years ago. So I'm still sort of their lawyer in some ways, advisor, manager, help them run their business, which even though they broke up as a band, they still have a business. So a small staff and myself kind of coordinate a lot of those things. And it's about it. I've learned a lot from pretty much anytime Michael Bracy asks me to do something, I say yes, because I've always learned from doing stuff with Mike Bracy, and whether it's Future Music Coalition, Music Policy Forum, or anything else I've ever done with you. I always take I get a lot more than I give. So that's honored to be on this. And I love talking about politics. Sure.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a couple of things, and something I apologize, I forgot to say at the outset. If anybody, don't feel obligated, but anybody wants to introduce himself in the chat, we love to see who's in here and where you're coming from. And also we'll be taking some questions in the Q&A window and get to as many questions as we can. And We're going to be with Bertis for the next 20 minutes or so, talking about R.E.M. and activism and politics and the changing landscape in Georgia and then changing landscape and music and all that. And so let's start with just the big news. I mean, a couple of big Senate races in Georgia. Let's just, try to do a thought experiment. And let's say it's November 2019, pre-COVID, pre a lot of this stuff. We knew there were going to be two Senate races in Georgia because of the retirement of one of the sitting senators. But would you have ever dreamed that these two candidates would push through and get this in your state?
Yes, I would have dreamed that because I'm typically optimistic, but I'm also wrong a lot. Living in Georgia, I'm more used to losing than winning. But there have been wins over the years. And I'll go ahead and tell anybody who's interested in it. There's a really good piece by Will Leitch, Leitch. He's more known as a sports writer than anything. He founded Deadspin. He's a friend of mine. He lives here in Athens, Georgia. And he wrote a piece that came out last Wednesday morning and had about a 3-hour shelf life, because you remember what happened on Wednesday afternoon. Will wrote a piece that I would commend anybody who wants to know what's been going on in Georgia. He's only lived here about 8 years, but he's a pretty quick study. He's a young guy with a nimble mind, and he was able to kind of encapsulate a lot of what I've experienced of 40 years of living in Georgia. And I think the title of the piece was something like "Georgia Has Always Been a Blue State." Mm-hmm. And that's a provocative title. It's, but it's worth going and checking out. Somebody can probably find it and put it in the comments. But he did a pretty good job, I feel like, of really, Georgia's always had, like most states, it's not one way or the other. It's a mixture of two very strong strains. And I live in Athens, which has always been the cliched, liberal oasis, blue oasis in a red state. So many states are like this. And more, the changing demographics, the key in the last election was the loss by Stacey Abrams in 2018, when she lost very narrowly. Practically margin of error kind of stuff. A lot of disputes of how that whole election went down. Stacey is a very, she's, I can think of a lot of ways to say it in a hackneyed way. I'll just say she's kind of she decided to apply the lessons she'd learned, and particularly to turn a negative into a positive, which is something I think we all do as part of the human condition. We try to take negative things that happen to all of us in our lives, and we try to figure out how do we turn this around? How do we make this better? And pretty quickly, she'd already started the New Georgia Project, but pretty soon she started Fair Fight. From that, she started Fair Count, which was about the census. And she put a lot of things in motion and hired a lot of good people, and really went about helping change the psychology of voting, so that not just people who'd always voted and voted every election voted, but the term of art that I've, as an amateur, I can learn: low propensity voters that don't vote all that often, people that never really thought of voting or never were able to vote or never even thought it even applied to them or didn't have anything to do with their life. She helped change the psychology. She didn't do it alone. Like most things, there's somebody who gets a whole lot of the credit, and she deserves a whole lot of the credit. But there are tons and tons of activist organizations in this state, run by people half my age, that's for sure. Some barely older than my kids' age. And they just, I feel like I've just been talking way too much, but you can ask me another question, or I can keep rambling for a while.
No. I think it's, obviously we all have to we're all going to have to get distance on a lot of things we're all living just in an incredibly complicated, period of time right now. And 4 months, 6 months, we can kind of look back and have more context. It's super interesting. Oh, and thanks to Jordan Stepp for putting the Will Leitch piece into the,
it's worth checking.
We've seen a bunch of factors, and I want to pull the conversation back to music a little bit, or a lot, because that's what we're supposed to be talking about. But certainly we've seen, my state of Virginia, go from being, pretty hard red to being purple to now be solidly blue. We've seen that in Colorado. Yep. You had the sister, situation this year with Georgia and Arizona going, the S2 Sunbelt states going through the same conversation. And I part of it makes, and one of the reasons I really want you to join us today, Bertis, beyond the Georgia piece, is, we're living through this sort of transformation of how artists are, sort of, public focused and public centered in terms of everything they do. For most artists, are like their life is an open book, because it's on social, it's on Instagram, it's embedded on YouTube. And I think a lot about, and again, full disclosure, Bertis knows this, but for everybody else, I mean, I am literally like the R.E.M demographic, right? R.E.M is my favorite band, blah, blah, blah. So, I probably paid more attention than most, to the evolution of the band being always political. The band was always deeply political, but if you weren't looking for it in the early days of the band, you wouldn't necessarily see it. And it feels like the band went through an evolution over a period of 10, 15 years to feel like they had not only an opportunity, but sort of an obligation to try to speak and try to, be in conversations that a lot of other bands and other artists maybe were not as comfortable doing. And could you speak a little bit, Bertis, to the kind of early evolution of the band making those decisions?
Early days. I mean, when I think back to the, one of the very first times they just always did benefits. They always were happy to use the stuff they were good at, music, to help out. And whether it was a benefit at a pizza parlor that had burned down or had a house fires, I can't remember the details, in North Carolina, or a thing at the Moonshadow Saloon in Atlanta, Georgia, which they did for two different environmental organizations. They happened to know both of the people who ran them socially, to early candidate Gwen O'Looney, who ran for mayor in our town in the mid to late 80s. They just always been willing to contribute. They've always liked helping out and using their skills and their talents and that kind of thing. And then as they grew and as their career had a bigger footprint, as they had more impact, they started getting asked to do things. Are you willing to, would you like to come out and play the bridge school for Neil Young, which is not overtly political, but it's it helps those kids. It helps the bridge school. And they were honored to be asked by Neil, and they got to play with Neil. And that was obviously a life dream. And then a few years later, they got to go do that Vote for Change tour with Bruce Springsteen and the Pearl Jam guys. And you were a part of all that. And we ended up the finale in DC. And so it's always kind of been in their DNA. I mean, that's who they are. That's who they are as individuals. That's who they are collectively. The thing is, the morning, I don't remember another time in my life, and it's a pretty long life at this point, that I've had external events, two different external events, nothing to do with me personally, just external events out in the world somewhere, that lead to a happier morning and a sadder afternoon than last Wednesday, the 6th. Because we woke up in the morning, I went out, saw all the yard signs on my yard, posted it on Facebook, all the yard signs for Warnock and Ossoff, and a couple of more generic ones, some folk art signs that had been spun off from the campaign, including this awesome billboard there, the Warnock and Ossoff billboard. Went out to my yard and I saw that, and I was just kind of thinking, first of all, I'm going to leave them up for a couple of days. I don't think we have to take them down the very next day. We'll leave them up for a little while. We took them down a couple of days later. But I was just thinking, as hard as all these people worked, so many bands, Death Cab for Cutie, all the Merge Records people, Democratic for the People out of Nashville. We don't even know them. It popped up out of nowhere. People covering Georgia songs. So many voter rights organizations and voter engagement organizations and ballot monitoring teams of lawyers and all this work. My God, it was so close. I mean, that just it really sobered me in terms of like how close you come to losing, even with that much work by that many people, with some pretty clear choices of candidates. And that's why the concept of Georgia as a blue state at this point feels a little premature to me.
Right.
I mean, we're definitely a complicated state. We might soon have both a governor and two senators, all Democrats, which would put us as, I think, the 17th state in the country that would be the case. There aren't that many. And I'm not saying it's in the bag at all, but it does really strike me. And then, of course, a couple hours later, that goes out of your brain for about the next week because of what all's been happening in where you are right now in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. It's that was a long and complicated day, and
quite a day.
It's been a long and complicated couple of weeks, and it's a little
Michael, I got
it's
being
quite a thing to wake up this morning and check the weather for next Wednesday to see it's going to be 50 degrees and sunny and know that nobody's going to be on the mall.
Well, I got over being disappointed about not being there because in my voting life, I've only had 3 Democrats win, and they were Obama. They were Clinton in 92. I got to come to the inauguration. That was really fun, January of 93. Obama, 08. I got to come to the inauguration with my little kids. At that point, they were little. Now they're big. And that was really fun. So I've had it booked for a long time to come to the inauguration. And as of, early this week, I decided once Muriel Bowser said, don't come. And but as of yesterday morning, I saw the troops on the mall and saw the footage. It was like, I wouldn't want to be there. What a dumb idea to even think about going to the inauguration. So I'm going to miss this one, obviously. I guess we're all going to be watching it the same way, which is on TV, whether we're there or not. And I'm disappointed not being there, but sad.
Well, let's pivot, Bertis, a little bit, and let's just talk R.E.M. because you guys had a pretty big year last year. You've had you've been doing a series of reissues and a lot of press around them, and that great Song Exploder episode of Netflix. And so talk a little bit about what is this like? So the band's retired. You've got a lot of people who cherish the band. A lot of people have never heard the band. What have kind of been the thinking for you and the guys just in terms of?
It's been a really interesting 10 years. I never would have guessed we'd still be busy 10 years later. I mean, when they broke up in 2011, called it a day, whatever they termed it, they decided to, stop and not be an active band anymore. They stuck to that. They've had plenty of offers to change their mind. They had their time. It was a wonderful 31 years, and they made a bunch of good records and have a body of work, which is now its own legacy. And so we try to be mindful of all that. We try to be creative with it. They take the lead on everything, or they approve everything. It all has to be obviously, I'd say we all communicate as much or more than ever, even when they were an active band. And the reissues are just kind of fun. We started doing them with Murmur, whenever that would have been, 08, I guess, which was the year of their last tour, as it turns out. And then every year or two, another 25th anniversary. So far we've it's fun to go back in the vaults and find all these demos and live shows and different takes on the artwork, and everybody gets involved in liner notes. And so it's been it's been more active than I would have thought. The two things I'm most happy about doing in the last 5 years or so is we did an MTV box set, which was everything they've ever done on MTV. And then we copied that again 3 years later with everything they've ever done on the BBC. Both times it wasn't necessarily the easiest business affairs thing to pull together, but both times everybody loves R.E.M. We have fans at all those places, labels, networks, they all want to see it happen. Nobody's going to make a ton of money off of it. Let's figure out a way to make it happen. That was essentially the spirit. And it was a lot of fun to put together. And those are really nice things to have on your either on your hard drive or on your shelves as these box sets that are kind of definitive histories of the band through the eyes of the MTV or in the case of the BBC box set, it was both visual and audio. So those were both kind of fun. And I don't know what the next few years will hold, but my guess is the music will still be around. People will still care about it. It'll be our job to help it live and help it find new audiences and, do it in a classy way.
We've got a great question in from Agent Squires checking in from London, and I'm going to take her question. I'm going to kind of build on it a little bit using moderator's prerogative. So one of the things that we think a lot about, again, is that there are things that Bertis, here's my generation did that there are approaches and their philosophies that we had in the independent scene, especially before digital, before, when things were analog, before email, right? I mean, there are sort of lessons around community building and engagement and how do you find a fan base and how do you negotiate a contract and how do you sort of navigate that are as important today, if not more important. And Agent Square's question is really about sort of like where we're going in terms of technology around blockchain and smart contracts and Bitcoin and all of the sort of evolutions are having there. And unless you have a take on Bitcoin, which I'm not sure that you do, I don't have a take on Bitcoin. So if you do, certainly I'd love to hear that. But what I also would love to hear is sort of any thoughts or reflections you would have in terms of sort of that generation of leadership that helped some incredibly important artists navigate what is, just a tricky industry, always has been and will be a tricky industry. And how can artist advocates be thinking about that as these new technologies are being developed?
Oh, that's Agent Squires. I'm not sure who you're an agent for, but that's a really good question between you and Bracy putting that together. I'm just glad that I'm retired and I can easily, say, well, looking back and tell a couple of more stories about the old days. I mean, we had to decide whether to get a fax machine or not. That's how long ago. FedEx was a real luxury to think about actually getting something there the next day. My God, what an incredible. So, I mean, I really wish I had a great answer for you. I don't have a take on Bitcoin other than I don't understand it, and I'm probably missing out by not having invested in it or whatever. So I don't know. I would say I got really lucky. I was never in the music business. I was always in the R.E.M business. Right. And R.E.M had one essential rule: be true to themselves, write the music they wanted to write, do it the way they wanted to do it. And I got to help them do that. It worked. So I feel incredibly unqualified to answer questions like that. I'm happy that I get to go to Future Music Policy Forum type events that I've gone to over the years. I always soak in as much as I can, and the stuff that's over my head, I figure I'll talk to somebody about it at some future point and try to understand it better myself. So I'm sorry to be of zero help on that question, other than I feel like there will always be music. People will always be creative. There will always be an industry that takes advantage of people like that who want to be creative, and it's just in their blood, and they're just always going to do it no matter what. But people are going to figure out a way to make it work as a career, or at least some of them are. What's the challenge, and what I think you started 20 years ago, Michael, or more, is that middle class of the working class. How do you, whether you win the lottery or not, and you probably don't, how do you piece together an actual working class, middle class life with music as your main source of income? It's harder and harder question, even with the proliferation of music that's out there.
Yeah.
Terrible answer.
Bertis, and I do, you're incredibly humble, and that's one of the reasons we like you so much. But I think one of the things I worry a lot about, or I'm concerned a lot about, is that, again, as we have new technologies, a new industry, new demands on artists, new ways of communicating, all these things are incredibly overwhelming, and there's so much possibility and so much, areas of concern. And I think the biggest thing I think about always is that if we attack this industry from a winner-take-all perspective, we're just not going to work, and the way that we have to attack this is as through collaboration and information sharing and collaborative mentorship, and trying to figure out who has different pieces of information that we can cobble together different ways of approaching this stuff. And that's something I think that you, put the band aside, that you and some of your colleagues, from day one have been incredibly curious and generous and willing to work together. And I hope that, again, the future leaders who are helping support artists moving forward, take that same spirit, because that will give us a chance to do some things we otherwise can't do.
And your convenings, whenever we can do them again in person, they're so invaluable because of the people you meet. They may be a totally different generation than you, from a different genre, different continent. Those are so valuable for me. It's what I learned, and I guess I must do some little bit of teaching too. So I feel like our time may be roughly up, and I know you got other guests, but I'm going to stay on and just put me back video and all that.
Well, Bertis, it's always good to see you. Well, great job for everybody in Georgia for getting this done.
Hey, we're trying to celebrate it, but it's hard to with everything else going on. But
on the 22nd, we have a big celebration, and we look forward to everything else that's coming down the pike from R.E.M. and the ongoing work that the guys are doing, and still making records, still playing shows, still out in the community. So we're going to pivot to something kind of fun, Bertis. Actually, I'd love you to see, Alex, if you can pull up one thing that happened during the Georgia campaign, where, there's just such an overwhelming amount of grassroots activism efforts and ways of trying to engage the community. And something really jumped out at me, an effort called Vote Tree, which I really, really enjoyed because, again, when Bertis is talking about strategies like Vote for Change, And that's the model we may go to again. But basically, that is like, how do we get 20,000 people into a basketball arena to get motivated and energized and register to tell their friends and all this? Vote.tree, and Alex, do you think we can show that video? Are you able to show that video? Fantastic. Vote.tree is a little bit of a different model that I'll show this video. We'll talk a tiny bit about it as we bring in our next guest, Dalouge Smith.
Art communicates the heart and soul of a nation. Artists interpret our stories and inspire generation yet unborn. Without the arts, without music, without dance, without drama, without photography, the civil rights movement would have been like a bird without wings. When we were surrounded by an angry mob in a Montgomery church, when people threatened to burn the church down, when we were beaten, gassed, and trampled with horses, it was the music that lifted us and made us strong. The civil rights movement was supported by artists who stood with us, marched with us, and supported the cause of justice. Artists have the ability, the capacity to make it plain, to make it real. So what you must do today, go out there and make it plain, make it real. You must stay true to power. So you must not give up. Maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now.
Thank you, Alex. So again, that's the voice of the beloved Congressman John Lewis. And part of what is really neat, I think, about the Vote.tree model is basically that became a platform for young, not just young folks, but for people in Georgia to go down to Atlanta to see the original art that had been commissioned by young artists and Instagram it and put yourself out there, put it out in social. And so you think about the power of getting these images out into the community in different ways of sort of sharing enthusiasm and information. And I think Alex put the Vote.tree web link in the chat. The original art now is actually for sale if people are interested in either purchasing original work or posters. But it's just, I just love the fact that we have this very organic sort of evolution in how we think about the intersection of culture and activism. And I'm excited to see where things go. And as we pivot to talk about the future, I'm thrilled to bring in our friend Dalouge Smith from the Lewis Prize for Music. Dalouge, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be back with the Music Policy Forum.
Yeah, good to see you. So talk a little bit, if you don't mind, just for those who are not familiar with the Lewis Prize and even the whole field of community youth development, could you kind of just walk through some big picture stuff?
Sure. So let me start by saying the Lewis Prize for Music was founded in 2018 by Daniel Lewis, who I saw has joined us today. So we can all say thank you to Dan for making this decision and making this investment. The Lewis Prize for Music is focused on, let me actually sort of tell us, go back. When the effort was first started, basically the intention was to find and support incredible leaders who are using music for positive social change. And that's a massive body of people. And so the first 2 years was really spent narrowing down how do we make a purposeful focus so that it's not a sort of just come one, come all, and we'll see who's out there and we'll see what they're doing. But how do we actually elevate certain priorities and identify ways in which music is being most impactful and kind of most potent in service of social change. We actually did two things simultaneously. We actually looked at the intersection between music and human rights and the fulfillment of human rights, and how is it that music has positive influence on employment, on education, on health, on mobility, etc. there's the UN goals, there's the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So the sustainability goals, I should say, the UN sustainability goals. So we were looking at that. And then we also did a really kind of comprehensive analysis of what we ended up identifying as 42 different music practice areas, and looked at how built out are they, how nascent are they, how prone are they for some important evolution. And through that process, we ultimately identified creative youth development, which is a field that was really only been named creative youth development for about 5 or 6 years, but is actually, you could almost say, as old as art and music itself. It's really about intergenerational learning. It's about giving young people a sense of self and place, and developing human development, using art as an important asset in human development. And so we ultimately identified that creative youth development is working very directly in all of these spaces that are also aimed toward the fulfillment of human rights. And so in 2019, we narrowed down to this focus, and we can get into some more specifics, but we narrowed down into this focus and opened up an application, basic criteria: be a creative youth development music organization anywhere in the United States, and tell us what you're doing, tell us how you're doing it. And the sort of the pivot point that we really wanted to focus on was systems change. How are you undertaking the work in ways that go beyond the direct instruction, but in ways that actually enable and empower young people, and then enable and empower young people to make change in their own community, and do that with a purpose toward an equitable society.
Mm-hmm.
So in January of 2020, we named our first awards. We gave 3 of what we call our accelerator awards, Lewis Prize Accelerator Awards, of $500,000 each, to an organization in San Diego, the David's Harp Foundation, an organization in Portland, Oregon, My Voice Music, and an organization in Providence, Rhode Island, Community Music Works, and then some smaller grants to groups in New Orleans, Detroit, Southwest, Philadelphia, Utah, in Salt Lake City. So we've now just announced our second round of awards, $500,000 awards. And this year we gave 4 of these awards. Beyond the Bars, based in Philadelphia. We're excited to have some of their team here with us today. Hyde Square Task Force in Boston, the St. Louis Story Stitchers in St. Louis Story Stitchers Artist Collective, I should say, is their full name, and then Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, obviously based in Detroit. So that's a snapshot of the Lewis Prize for Music.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. And this is maybe, I don't know if this is a fair question, or you can just say unfair question, we'll move on. But I mean, I'm always interested in terms of, philanthropy moving into a sector, recognizing this enormous need, because again, these other organizations that are not being funded in these particular cycles are still doing remarkable work. And so Could you speak to sort of a long-term vision of, sort of raising the profile and awareness about the importance of the entire sector, and where that ideally would lead over a period of time, so Lewis Prize isn't simply, a major funder making these incredibly important grants, but building support for everybody?
Yes, so that's not an unfair question. That's an absolutely appropriate question. And as Daniel Lewis has said many times, like I may have resources to make this kind of award. That's not enough to change the realities of entire neighborhoods, entire cities, the entire country, right? So where does that kind of leveraging resource live? It lives in our governments. It lives in our collaborations with each other. It lives in cross-sector efforts. And so we're very much, we basically have said, we've got three ways in which we're trying to advance both the awardees themselves, but the creative youth development field. And so that's obviously an access to resources, but it's also increasing visibility and understanding of this work. And the third is expanding networks and enabling greater sense of relationship and connection across, not just across organizations or across sectors, but across the country. And we have just gotten started, right? I mean, we have now given 2 cycles of awards. We did also do a very fast response to COVID. We gave over $1 million in grants in June. We basically did an open application for our COVID Community Response Fund. And unlike so many other response funds, we didn't say, what is it that you need? And we'll decide if we're going to give you some money to keep doing that. What we actually asked folks was, what are you doing for your community because your community needs it? And so that's why we use this phrase Community Response Fund. And we actually were giving creative youth development organizations who were providing income replacement, providing academic supports, technology, Wi-Fi access, providing mental health supports, providing food security, providing transportation, right? Like, again, going back to the notion of what do you need to have a full and complete life? You need your human rights fulfilled. And these organizations were undertaking that in extraordinary ways. I mean, here's a little example. Taking what had always been a lunchtime or meal program in an after-school program, basically turning the transportation side of the program and the meal side of the program into a meal delivery program, delivering thousands of meals. This is a music program, delivering thousands of meals to families every week.
Yeah.
That's just astounding. And these groups have just kind of amped up their service to their communities in the midst of this past year.
Well, it's so inspiring, and I can't wait to bring our friends from Beyond the Bars in just a second. And I just say before we welcome them in, again, I mean, I've been incredibly blessed to do this work for 22 years, and one of the things, I mean, we always talk about is that music isn't widgets, right? Music is not. We should be talking about the commoditization of music and the monetization of music and meow, meow, meow. I mean, music, again, to your point, is humanity. It's empathy. It's communication. It's all the things that make us human. And we have been consistently so inspired by all these organizations from, again, all of Kate Becker's historic work with Vera Project in Seattle, Jeff Tribble, musicianship here in DC, of course, Roots of Music in New Orleans, obviously, all the incredible team behind Youth on Record in Denver and other cities. And so to see you all coming into the field to kind of bring this focus and attention and elevating these voices and putting significant resources behind them is something that we're just thrilled by. So we're so excited to have you, and I'm going to ask you to tee up our next guest a little bit. Why don't you talk a little bit about Beyond the Bars? So
Beyond the Bars, based in Philadelphia, I mean, they're going to need to tell their own story, yes, of course, but let me just say one of the reasons I'm really excited that they're being featured here today is because they have a very tight relationship with the professional music industry community in Philadelphia. And Betts, who is one of the lead artists and instructors, is with us, and Sky, who is a young person who has come through Beyond the Bars and now become a leader in her own right and an instructor in her own right, is with us. And so they need to tell their story, but I think it'd be great to have them also speak about what does it mean to have a local music industry support the kind of work that they're doing. And I think we all dream that would be possible.
Thank you, Dalouge. That's a great introduction. Betts and Sky, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you. And what should we know? Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And I've been taking notes this whole entire time. I've really been learning a lot. My name is Betsaleel Charmelus, Betts for short. I am a first generation Haitian American artist, facilitator, thought seed planter, storyteller through my band Ill Fated Natives, and I'm an educator and leader at Beyond the Bars, and I have been for the past 3 years. And I'll talk about the organization a little bit more, but I just wanted to give Sky an opportunity to introduce herself.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Sky. I'm one of the singers and musicians as well as a youth leader at Beyond the Bars. I've been with Beyond the Bars for about 4 years now, and yeah, I'm glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're all the better to have you, Sky. You should know that. Yeah, Beyond the Bars is a nonprofit organization based out of here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are dedicated to interrupting cycles of violence and incarceration through the use of music and music education. And what that looks like is having artists that are working, that have been working, and that are committed to teaching our youth how to be an artist in the space, teaching them the music skills, the hard music skills, and also teaching how to be leaders in their own community, so that the goal is to inspire a new generation of youth to become leaders like Sky has become in her own community.
Tell me more. So how do you do that? I mean, I'm sorry. That was a great.
Absolutely, yeah.
No. I mean, so that's great. So what does this look like in practice? So about your sort of model in terms of constituents and sort of how you engage.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, Beyond the Bars itself as an organization started off going into prisons and really dealing directly with the carceral system. And one of the things that the leaders and the founders, Matthew Kerr and Christopher Thurton, wanted to do was make sure to, instead of dealing at the end of the situation, seeing all of these talented youth in prison already and kind of victims of the carceral system that we know is constantly trying to eat our youth, our Black and brown youth alive, trying to interrupt that pipeline before it goes further down the line. And the way that we started to do that was to connect to artists. I met Matthew through an artist friend of mine who introduced me, and that's how I got involved in the program. So just connecting to artists and being like, hey, do you guys want to do something to help support the show? Earlier, Bertis was talking about R.E.M. and starting with benefit shows. And that's exactly how Beyond the Bars started, with a lot of benefit shows where bands would just get together and participate and try to raise money and also create an opportunity and a platform for our student artists also to perform. My band, Ill-Fated Natives, has also participated in a couple of these benefit shows. And just to see how it's grown since the beginning, and it's, house shows and kind of just people kind of putting things together, and then also offering to volunteer and, hey, like, I'm off of tour, I'm going to come in and try to teach some youth guitar or bass, and to see how it's grown into now a community of producers, a community of artists that go into other environments where we're dealing with homelessness, we're in recreational centers, we're still in jails and working in jails, and seeing the organization grow and being able to reach all these communities, it feels like positive growth exponential. So it's like I do something and I see it squared and then it continues to grow from there.
So Sky, how did you connect with these folks?
Actually through my mom. She previously worked at the juvenile center. So she met Mr. Matt, and she already knew that I wanted to get more into music. But a lot of music programs, you had to pay for it. So it was perfect that it was free at the time. And it still is free. But yeah, that's how I got into Beyond the Bars.
And how long ago, how old were you when you got connected to them?
I was 14 or 15 years old.
And what did
I'm 18 now.
Yeah. So what did that look like? I mean, that's a hard age to like try something new around trying anything, right? I mean, so you just sign up for sessions and just kind of show up, or kind of what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So originally it was at the CEC where it's back now. And I had to fill out a form with like, just saying that it was okay if I had to do any meetings or any type of videos or pictures, that would be okay with that. But other than that, I didn't really need to fill out any type of forms or anything. It was just, hey, come see how it is. And if you like it, then, you can be a part of it.
And what was your kind of typical experience like? I mean, were there structured courses or more open sessions, or just kind of a mix, or what? Kind of like, how did that play?
It was structured. In the beginning, I went there for piano, but then I got more into bass with Betts. He was my instructor and still is. But yeah, it was structured. We would have jam sessions sometimes, but after that, we would break off into small groups to where they would, teach us more about whatever instrument we wanted to learn about.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
And do you have ambitions of a career in music, or are you, I mean, is that something you like to do to make a living, or just something that you're really glad that you can do? Like, it's just fun to do?
I wouldn't say I would do a career in it, but I am definitely glad to be a part of the organization and to be able to make music like that, for sure.
I would like to just jump in real quick. Sky and I have a really close relationship because I was really one of the main teachers that saw her first when she didn't know how to hold the bass, to now being an incredible musician, an incredible songwriter, and a vocalist, and seeing her teach other students, which is one of the main goals of this organization, period, is self-efficacy and going into a community where we have students that might not even know what they want to do with their lives generally, offer them music as a medium to find what they want to do, then also have career planning, having discussions about how they want to show up in the world, and then offer them opportunities to be leaders in their own right. So I just kind of wanted to jump in there to see Sky has been really, really inspiring to me. I also do want to talk about the technology aspect that we were talking about earlier that was being talked about. How do we understand, as I'm a working musician, how do I understand Bitcoin and all of these shifting things? One of the things that having youth has really helped me is they don't necessarily need to understand it. They're born with it, so they kind of already have an understanding of it that I'm learning from them. So I'm like, oh, cool. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about that? And they're like explaining it to me, like, you don't know about this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm, taking all of these notes. But it's also been filling my cup as well. And it's not a one-way relationship.
Yeah. And Betts, how extensive is your sort of network of teachers and other collaborators? And like, how does that work in terms of compensation structures? Are there full-time staff, part-time staff, mostly volunteers, kind of a whole mix?
Yeah, so we have 8 programs throughout the city that are serviced by a number of teachers that were all volunteer for a very long time, including our director, Matthew Kerr, who is really making a lot of sacrifices. And now, thanks to the Lewis Prize and the Accelerator Awards, we do have resources now and to be able to pay a lot of the teachers who have been sacrificing so much for the past few years and enable kind of a salary structure and really encourage them in that way. So yeah, we've got a lot of growth ahead of us.
Yeah. And the city how's the city been? I shouldn't make any assumptions. Has the city government been welcoming? Have they been like, what's the...
Yeah. From both sides of the coin, I'd say. From the side of, okay, we're artists, we're, kind of nose to the grindstone on the street, and also from, the organizational standpoints of the city, we have gotten a lot of support in the city from both sides, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been so great.
Michael, can I add something?
Oh, go ahead, Dalouge, jump in.
I just want to add, for us on the outside, seeing beyond the bars, what's evident is that this is a group of people who saw a need. They kind of used their relationships and their skills to make some opportunity happen. And after a few years, it was like, oh my gosh, we are doing an immense amount here. Like, this is way out of scale of just like a casual, I think I'll be like spend a few hours on this, right? And so I think this is unfortunately the circumstance for so many projects like this, where they are so much passion, so much heart, so much giving that's going on, coming right out of the community itself. And like, what does it take to go from that to actually a kind of more stable, consistent offering to the community? And so for the Lewis Prize, we're really excited to see where they all go next, because the riches they have in terms of relationship and partnership and engagement with young people, and taking their letting the young people lead the design of the programs, all that stuff is so solidly in place. Dollars are the easy part. That stuff is the hard part.
Right. Exactly.
Are you guys a 501c3 now? Are you raising money? Are you got a board structure and all that?
Yes, we are 501c3, have a board structure, all that. Yeah.
How long ago did you start?
About since 2015, so 6 years ago now.
Wow.
The organization started. Yeah.
But all tied in with the whole community schools movement within the Philadelphia city schools.
Yes, we do have some schools as partners. Yeah, so we do go into schools.
Because it ties so much into the whole concept of what a community school is all about as a hub, and the arts and extended school days to give kids more time in positive environments. I'm just so inspired by it. I as always, whenever Bracy gets me involved in something, I always learn more than I.
Yeah, that means a lot, especially coming from you. That really means a lot. And I do want to tie in something that Dalouge had mentioned, the fact that our approach and the part of the organization that I'm the director of is the SDMA, or the Student Driven Music Academy, which is, hey, come in. What do you want to learn? I'm the traditional schooling system for so long, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with this. The power dynamic is one person is the unquestionable authority. They stand in the front and they spit facts, and that's it. Whereas now we can create an environment, especially for Black and brown students, to come into a space and then, hey, you tell me what you want to learn, and I'm going to use what I know to try to get you there, which is what community building is all about.
Bets, this is so great. And Sky, we are so appreciative of you coming and sharing what you guys are up to in Philadelphia. And Dalouge, thank you so much for suggesting and connecting us with Bets and Sky and Behind the Bars. Again, the website is probably the best starting point to learn more about the organization. And again, that's in the chat. And certainly, if you want to have direct contact or follow up, feel free to email me at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com, and I'll just make sure everybody's tagged up. But this is, I think what's so inspiring, and again, this is kind of why we wanted to combine Bertis and the earlier conversations with this, because I think we all need a little bit of hope and optimism and a sense of the future, and a sense that we have pathways moving forward, and it's not because of people like me in Washington, D.C., it's because of people like Bets and Sky and a lot of others who are doing the hard work and, really on the ground, innovating and thinking and being brave and creative and visionary. And it's our job to figure out what's happening in the community and how we can best support it. Again, when we're with everybody next Friday, we'll have a new president, and we're going to have a difference of, hopefully a pathway forward to a different tone and some more creative thinking. Again, we've talked about this a lot. The Biden administration, we are very confident, is going to have a much more holistic view about the power of arts and culture and how it fits into everything that Bets and Sky are talking about in terms of youth engagement, in terms of community development, in terms of everything. So we're just, again, so appreciative of our guests. And again, Alex Dolvin always does a great job producing the program. Alex, thank you as always. And we love to see all the smart things in the chat. Thank you again for spending your Friday with us and being active participants. This program will be on our website at musicpolicyforum.org over the weekend, along with all of our other program archives. If you want to go back and see old programming or see the session that we did with Dalouge at the Music Policy Forum Intensive, that all lives on the site. Again, questions, comments, suggestions, very kindly worded creative criticism, hit us at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. And otherwise, hope everybody has a safe weekend, a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Thank you, everybody.